So today we're going to start wet sanding on Ryan's Camaro. You guys probably saw this car. We worked on this for a year or so. This has been painted for 2 or 3 months now. He's had it out driving around. He's been driving it. So it's seen plenty of sun. It's been baked really well. It has shrunken a lot since we painted it. So the way we're going to do this car, being that it's not a super high-end build or anything, we're going to block it once with 1000 grit. We're going to use a combination of the regular linear blocks, and then we've also got some wet sanding blocks that we're going to be releasing soon. We're going to be using on this. They are acrylic on one side and various stiffnesses of foam on the other. So when we do this, the whole point is to block this car flat to begin with. Right now there's some peel in it, there's a little bit of dirt here and there, and around the stripes you can feel the edge. The stripes kind of look like a decal because that's what happens when you do stripes. The lettering, you can feel it. We're gonna try to get all that out, and then we're gonna go to the DA, because yes, it will look better if we block from say 600 up to 3000, but it'll still be really straight if we block it with 1000 and then go to the DA, especially being that this clear is nice and hard. It's been dried for a long time, so the DA won't be as aggressive on the clear as it would if it was fresher. So when we start wet sanding, the water, I like to use a water bottle. Some people use a garden hose and get everything soaking wet, but we like to try to contain the mess as much as we can. So we're going to use squirt bottles, and when I need to change my paper or I need to stop sanding for some reason, we take some microfibers, dry it off, just kind of contains the mess a lot better. But for our water, we're using just water, and then I just like to put just a little shot of Dawn dish soap in there, and that basically is just going to help lubricate things. It's not going to hurt the paint or anything, so put a little dish soap in there, give it a little shake. And then when we start blocking this, so we've cleaned this car very well, just from it sitting. Just things get dirty just from sitting. So we've wiped it down really well, so now we're gonna start blocking. And when I do this, I'm gonna spray some water on the door. And it's also critical to make sure that when you put the sandpaper on the block, there's no debris on the block, no debris on the sandpaper, because if I have a little piece of dirt or sand or something in there, it's gonna make a bump in the sandpaper and it's gonna gouge it. At this point, you have to be very careful about gouging things. So clean block, clean sandpaper, clean water. And we're gonna block this basically just like we did during body work, except I'm not gonna use quite such a long block. I don't need to use a 32-inch block to block this door because it's already straight. We're trying to just get the peel out of the surface. Okay, you can probably stop. So after that little bit of blocking, you can see what we're after here. You won't see this when this is wet. That's why I like to block a little bit, take a microfiber, dry it off. But this is what we want it to look like, nice and flat. There's no peel, no shininess. Basically, we're going for no shine. And right here, you can see, because I'm using a hard block, it looks like it's somewhat gouging it, but it's not. It's just because that's the nature of using hard blocks to block clear. If I take a soft block, it won't be as precise. And being that every panel has shape, like this panel has a big shape this way, it's very round, and it actually kind of kicks back out on the bottom. So being that the panel has shape and we're using a hard block, when you're going around this shape, you're not actually using the entire block because the base of the block is flat. It might be flexible the long way, but the short way, that block is hard and flat. So you may only be using a quarter, 3/8, a half of the actual sanding surface of the block at certain times and certain shapes. So I get a lot of questions about this, about how it looks like it's really scratching it very deep. The more aggressive you are, obviously, the more of that you're gonna have. But that is the nature of sanding with a hard block. You can't hard block everything all the way through up to 3,000. So what we do, if I was gonna hard block this whole car and we weren't gonna use a DA at all, we would hard block up to maybe 1,200, and then at 1,500, 2,000, 3,000, we would go to a block like this that has a foam side, and we use the foam side for the finishing grits, because once you cut this straight, sanding it with a hard block at 2,000 and 3,000 isn't gonna make it any straighter. It's already straight. So as long as you know how to block and you know how to use a block, you can absolutely go to foam after you've actually cut it flat. I also get some questions on this about the paper plugging up, why the paper seems to plug up easily with certain grits and things when wet sanding. The reason that is because when I use a hard block, this side of the block, no give. See, no give, I can't push a dent into it. Foam side, there's a lot of give. So when you put sandpaper on foam, that kind of bobbles over the surface, and it will allow the slurry, the clear that you're sanding off, to clean out much easier. When you're using a hard block, it does not move. You will have slurry buildup that cannot escape the block. It won't clean out as well as a foam block, and that is why sandpaper plugs up more on a hard block than it does on a soft block. So now that I've got the door mostly blocked out, I've done all the big areas, I don't want to get too close to edges and things like that with the big block. That can get dangerous. That's where you're most likely to burn through, is going to be on an edge. So that's where the little blocks come in. These are the ones that are hard on one side and soft on the other. And we're using 1,000 grit wet. So now I can come in and hard block with a much smaller block and be much more precise. And I can get all this, the door edge and around the handle and things like that. And we will eventually end up taking the handle out and taking this molding off when we get a little farther here. So on the stripe, when we're trying to get a line out of the stripe line, like right here, I can't feel this line anymore. But if you see like right here, you see that little shininess, and up here, try to get it where you can see it. See that little shininess with this line? I can still feel, I can't feel it here, but I can feel it here. That shininess, that is still a slight little bump. And a foam block would go right over that, no problem. You'd never actually get it completely out. So that's why we hard block. And as you can see, I've got a few little spots here and there that aren't quite completely blocked out yet, but we're getting close. But if you want to get that line totally out of there, it has to look like this, not like this. When we painted this car, I didn't tell anybody about this, but I got a run. I got a pretty good one down in this bumper, trying to get clear all up in here and in all these pockets and things. I got a pretty good run right here.
So we're gonna go over today how to fix a run and hopefully not have to repaint it. I especially don't want to repaint this because it is a candy and that would be a lot of work.
So the first thing I'm gonna do is to actually put glaze on this. And why I'm gonna do that is because when you burn through trying to sand out a run, you don't burn through on the run. You burn through around the run because your block may be riding over things and you're sanding out here, not where your run is. And it's very critical to use a hard block if you're trying to get a run out. So I don't want to sand this before I put glaze on. I don't necessarily want this glaze to I'm not worried about it sticking because I'm going to sand it all off. But we're going to put a nice tight little coat of glaze in here. And you can actually see where the peaks of the run is. So I'm going to what this is going to do is be a barrier between this clear that is not a run and the runs. So when I start blocking this, I'll be sanding filler and the run and not the clear. I'm trying to just carve this run down to the level of the clear around it. Really not trying to sand the clear around it. So that's why we do this. This is a barrier between the clear that is high and the clear that is not high. So with this run, I put the glaze on there. It's been drying for a while. We're gonna start wet sanding this. Same process. I've got water with a little bit of soap in it, but I'm using the little block, hard side of the little block. And this is going to take some time. This is you have to be very patient with this whole process of sanding a run out, especially where I have it. I've got it kind of down in this groove, and it's gonna be pretty difficult to do this actually. But you can see already I'm starting to break through that glaze and hit the peaks of the runs, and that's what I want. That's why we use the glaze, so that I'm sanding the glaze, not the clear around the run. And as we get closer to having this all sanded off, I'm starting with 600 here, and we'll go to 800 once we get a little closer to having this out. We'll go to 800, and then once we're done with the glaze, once the glaze is all gone, I'll go to 1,000, and then we'll DA it from there like we're gonna do on the rest of the car. So just like that, we've got all the glaze off, and you can repeat that process if you think that you didn't get the run out all the way. You can do it again. It gets more dangerous every time you do it. But now when we wipe this out, no more run. So right now we're getting ready to start using the DA on the car. Most of the car has been wet blocked with 1,000. Ryan's gonna finish up blocking the roof while I start DAing everything else. But we've done 1,000 with wet blocking, and now I'm gonna go to 1,500. I'm confident enough with my DA abilities that I can go to 1,500 and know that I'm gonna get these scratches out and clean up these edges up here. A lot of this little edge work we're gonna kind of finish off with a DA. We're not trying to burn no edges. This is not a Riddler by any means. So if we were going for like a super straight show car finish on this car, we would continue using hard blocks. We would probably hard block at 1,200, hard block at 1,500, and then go to foam, maybe 1,500 for 2,000, 3,000 would be on foam. We're not doing that on this car. We blocked it with 1,000. It is straight. We are gonna put a little bit of a ripple in it using a DA naturally, because that's just DAs don't stand flat. So when I'm we're using the 3M paper, by the way. This is dry. We're doing 1500 DA dry. And when I do this, once I make one little pass, you can see all those directional scratches. This dust that I just made kind of highlights them. We're gonna sand that until those are gone. So now you can see right here, those directional scratches are gone. We're down to the pigtails, as they call it, and we'll deal with that later. But you can see on the edge of where I sanded, there's still those directional scratches. That's what we're looking for. As I'm sanding this, my eye is always scanning this area for directional scratches, because that's what we're trying to remove. So when we're DAing a car like this that's assembled, I generally like to use the tape to make sure that when I sand on this edge with the DA, that I'm not sanding on the clear on the adjacent panel. Because if I'm sanding two edges at once, especially, very good chance you're gonna burn through. It's dangerous to sand one, and you gotta be ginger with it, but that is a good way to make sure that you don't get a gouge in this panel from the DA spinning, from sanding this way, and you don't burn this edge trying to sand this edge, and vice versa. So now we're gonna repeat the same process with 2000. This is 2000 grit dry DA paper, 3M. We're gonna do this again with 2000, and then we're gonna go to 3000 wet Trizact paper. And after that, we'll polish. So every time we step a grit up, if we go from 1500 to 2000, now it is shinier than it was at 1500. Now we're gonna go to 3000, and this is wet Trizact paper. Same mixture of soapy water that we used when we did all the blocking. But now, we don't want it soaking wet. You want it so that it kind of foams up when you start sanding. If you have it too wet, what'll happen is this paper will actually float on top of the water and it won't really sand.